Welcome back to Building the Business Behind Open Source AI, our forum on open source AI monetization, organized in collaboration with Omnistrate. Our next speaker is an architect of the modern cloud. We're joined by Kamal Gupta and Alok Nikhil, co-founders at Omnistrate. They both spent time at AWS during their early days and behind the control plane for many services like Aurora, and over their career at AWS and Confluent, they've mastered the art of building and orchestrating control planes. And they'll be sharing the founder's guide to scaling OSS to production AI.
Hi, I'm Kamal Gupta, and I have Alok Nikhil with me as one of the other co-founders. Warm welcome to everyone at the event. I'm here to talk about guide to scaling open source projects and AI projects to production on AWS. The gap between the adoption and revenue is what I want to focus for the rest of my talk here. I want to start with prefacing, which is there are 3 stages to open source project journey. Now, I want to caveat that the third stage is an optional stage that depends upon the founder and where the goals and motivations are. The first stage is usually where the founder is looking to find a community of people or like-minded people to work on a problem together to contribute to a common code base or common problem. And the second step of the journey is really to find the project market fit, where the problem, they're looking for people who can find the value and derive the value out of the problem that is solved. And the third part is now, how do you commercialize that, and how do you have where people are ready to pay for it? You can generate value, or you can generate revenue more than just providing value. And I think that's the key part that we should separate, because there is a part about being honest and ethical about the open source projects that we have started and what its original core motivation is and how it is helping the community, versus how do you then commercialize it to create the value, and being very clear and transparent with your audience on that regard. And so the community where you're working with on an open source project to provide the value, that is a different value than the commercialization value. So I think let's not mix the community layer with the value layer. One is more adoption, and the second one is more revenue. So I like to call it mind share versus wallet share. So don't confuse the two. They are 2 different things. Alok and I have been working together for 10 years. I've been working in the industry for 20 years, and we have worked on many different open source projects to turn them into large-scale managed services. And this is also one of our core mission at Omnistrate, that we want to help the developers and founders out there take that journey, make that journey successful, and then be able to do so faster and better. All right. So I'm going to focus for the rest of the talk. I'm going to focus on that value layer. And so there are 4 pieces to the value layer, and you can think of them as ingredients, right? And what we're going to do is convert those ingredients into implementing different business strategies later. So let's first understand what those ingredients are. I'm going to take an example of Confluent, because we both worked at Confluent. As everybody knows, Confluent is backed by Apache Kafka, so everybody's familiar with that. It's a data streaming platform. So there were a bunch of things from the enterprise feature perspective that we added, which comes from reliability perspective, disaster recovery perspective, developer productivity perspective, security. So you need to add those things as you are building the enterprise notion of it. And we'll come back to second how these ingredients come together to build the different business strategies. The third ingredient is a distribution, which is where how do you make your software that you have built deployable anywhere easily to the requirements that customers are looking for. And finally, your go-to-market. So let's dig in a little bit, a quick sidetrack to understand a little bit distribution better. So distribution is something that turns your open source project into a product, and that is consumable, operatable, and purchasable, right? And I think if you look at what is happening in the industry or the whole world out there with the oil supply chain thing, it's ultimately a distribution problem, right? We are not able to distribute and get the oil from main centers to everywhere across the world. And so that is what we mean by distribution. I'm going to switch over to talk about how those 4 pieces or 4 ingredients, which were your open source project, enterprise features, distribution, and go-to-market, how we can bring them together to build different business models. Now, I will caveat here that there are many business models outside of what we're going to discuss today. I just picked the 3 that I found to be very popular and the ones that I personally have the experience in the past. The 3 business models that I want to talk today is product-led growth, co-sell motion with cloud providers, and enterprise motion. These 3 are very different from one another, and we're going to see, as we walk through the details in the rest of the presentation. But the PLG motion is a very bottoms-up motion. The partnership motion is the leverage motion, and the enterprise motion is a more a tops-down motion. And they bring very different values depending upon how you are adhering or catering to your customers. And most of the successful companies actually end up implementing pretty much all of them. They work in parallel and side by side of each other, alongside with each other. So let's dig into the product-led growth model. I think this is the one which I'm sure that most of the audience here will be very familiar with. I think so. You're in this model. This is a very organic model where you have your open source project, you have your community around there. There are people who are contributing to that. There are people who are using your software as open source software. So you already have the top of the funnel coming from there, and you're already engaged in the community out there. But how the next step, your journey in this typically is that evangelize with more specific niche events. Once you have the developer community pushing the contents and you're pushing and speaking at relevant events, you are now the next step in the journey is to enable developers to try out your product, right? Because they're going to know about your product. You typically would need a place where customers can come in and they can try your product and see with minimum friction how your product feels like. And once it crosses a certain threshold, that will give a signal to your team so you can engage with them to upgrade them to the higher tier. Now, this is a full motion where you started engaging with your community. You evangelized with your community. You generated an interest for them to come and give it a try. And then they found value and their use cases evolved, their use cases increases, and it penetrated from one developer to one team to multiple teams and into the entire organization, and their usage grew. As you can see, all of that has to be done. That's one thing about all of these business models. You cannot just do part of them and expect results, right? You have to implement all of it because you have to establish a full feedback loop cycle into what is working, what is not working. So if you implement half of the steps, you will not get that signal very well. What does it mean from the distribution point of view? What does it mean to implement product-led growth? Remember, this is a bottoms-up motion. You're talking to developers. It has to be. That's why the most important thing here is the simplicity and the experience, and provide that with least friction. And so when you're providing this solution, the developer should be able to come and try the product with zero friction. There shouldn't be any human sales call. There shouldn't be ideally any credit card in between required. People should be able to come and try your product and see what it does. Now, of course, you can have certain trial period, you can have certain limitation of the amount of usage, but there should be a way for developers to come, especially for the developer products, to come and try your product. Eventually, as they come and try, the usage grows. They should have a flexibility to move from the lower tiers to the higher tiers. The second aspect, which is very important, is typically developers don't want to engage in a commit or large commit. So they like to go more of a consumption-based model based upon the usage. So having some sort of a pay-as-you-go implemented is one of the critical elements of this business model. And the last aspect here which is very important, often underlooked, is remember, this is a bottoms-up motion. In order for this motion to be successful, it has to be fully automated because you are operating at scale. You're not operating at the handful of big enterprises. You're talking about operating in thousands and thousands of developers. And so it's important that your entire operations, from provisioning to upgrades to billing and providing insights and handling the operations if things go wrong, it has to be completely automated. Otherwise, just basically the economics will not work. Right? You cannot have your entire team be focused 100% of the time on this, because it just will not work out from that business economics point of view. So one key takeaway from this business model that I just want to get it out there is, if you have a product-led motion, your customers have to do an SSH or run a set of commands, then it's not a product-led growth. It has to be where customers get an endpoint and start using it and see the product and see how that will solve their problems and derive value out of it. I'll move on to the next motion. Now, this is a moving on from PLG motion to a co-sell partnership motion. And you will see in a second that how this is dramatically different from the previous motion. In this motion, the founders can work with cloud marketplaces like AWS to build their AWS transactable offer. Now, it's important that it's a fully transactable offer, and it's not some listing, and we'll come back to in a second what we mean by that. So you build your offer, you list your offer. It should be, you should have some initial traction that you can, so that AWS can validate, not only from the perspective of your technical solution, but also that you have some validity of product market fit in the community out there. And then you can go sell with AWS. Now, before this sounds like a set of steps. Let's first understand, why do we care? Before we jump into details of what is it. Now, anybody who has done enterprise sales understand that enterprise sale is so much more about than your own project. You have to deal with sales, procurement, legal, finance, trust, marketing. There's all slew of things that you have to go through one after the other. The advantage of this motion is really to enable AWS. So you can leverage the AWS sales team to co-sell your solution without having the sales team on your side. One of the other benefits is it simplifies, because the procurement and the legal on the other side, everybody trusts the standard contract, the cloud, the AWS contract. It simplifies your procurement and legal conversations and allows the enterprises on the other side to use the standard contract. The third is buyers can use their existing commits. You don't have to go to the enterprises and ask for an additional budget. They can use their already committed budget towards AWS to buy your software. And so that prevents you from going into finance jail. And the fourth, it is coming from the trust. It is coming from obviously, AWS is going to validate your solution, going to verify everything is there. It is coming from the trusted source. And that matters when you're selling, especially as a startup ISV selling to enterprises. And finally, AWS will support requests and your deployments or transactions towards enterprises to support on the POC funding side, to help you evangelize on the marketing activities. And so this is a motion, as you can see, helps throughout end-to-end in so many aspects of enterprise sales that is more than just your own technical project. So hopefully it makes sense that why we care about it. Now let's dig into what are some of the things. Obviously, nothing is free. You have to put in the effort to get there. And there is some amount of homework that you have to do as a startup ISV. One is you need to have a transactable listing, which is something that your customers can deploy and go from your AWS listing to something which is deployable through one click. Second, it has to provide an enterprise-grade SLA, especially if you are selling to enterprises, you have to be able to achieve that. You have to pass the foundational technical review, well-architected review from AWS. But in addition, there are additional standard compliances that will be required in order to sell to pricing. Every enterprise deals is usually involves some sort of custom pricing. So that involves working through private offers to be through AWS Marketplace private offers to accelerate some of the enterprise deals. And one of the optional things over here is you can also enable your one-click free trials if you want your customers to be, again, enterprise customers, especially for developer products, to come and try it, give it a try. So these are the things that, I think if you're building this motion, these are the things that are required. You should have an ability to be able to do and have your marketplace listing, your required trust and compliances, making sure you can achieve the SLA, making sure you have integrated billing, and be able to offer custom private offers. And so those are the things that needed to make this co-sell partnership motions or model successful. Now, if you want to take away one thing, I will say that often founders what they get wrong is they think that listing the marketplace is all they have to do. And I think I just want to clarify that's pretty much a myth, right? Like, listing will get you discovered. It will not get you paid. So if you really want to go end to end, it's important that you have a marketplace listing which is a transactable offer. So it's like having a restaurant with a billboard in front of it, but no kitchen inside. Guess what? What is going to happen if a customer shows up? Well, there's going to be no food on the table. That's not a restaurant, right? So it's like a same thing. So if we want this motion to be fully working, it's important that you have that engine working. And that engine is essentially somebody should be able to come in, they should be able to click and get the deployments going, and the billing should be integrated such that the metering records are reported to AWS, and you get the revenue. And all of that has to work. Obviously, along with some of the other requirements with respect to compliance and SLA and enterprise grade resilience that is required. The third model that I want to quickly touch is enterprise sales model. It's also a very traditional sales model. Everybody is probably familiar with this. In this model, you typically source. It's a very tops-down model. You source for your prospects. You outreach and go. Basically, once you source for your prospects, you filter it out. You figure out who is your target customers. You filter out to the relevant ones, some sort of scoring, and then you reach out to them. And then you do a demo, follow up with a POC, and you close it, right? That's typically in the set of stages you go from one stage to another. But if you look at if you go back to what are the requirements from the distribution point of view. One, you should be able to put together a production grade POC quickly, right? Because if customers would like to see the product, before they buy it. So how do you put together a solution and that caters to their requirements? They would like to see it before they buy it. The second aspect is being able to dedicate deployments is important, because enterprises will not going to buy something. They would like to have their own separate stack. They would like to have their own isolation, so to meet their enterprise security requirements. The third thing which is also happening is to be able to deploy in customer VPC accounts. So especially in the AI era, what is happening is we are producing software faster than ever, and lots of agents are coming out. And enterprises are basically saying, we are not going to open our data to everyone out there. So instead, they're flipping the model on its head by saying that, why don't we deploy the agents that ISVs want to offer into our lockdown VPCs? So having an ability to be able to deploy your solution in a customer's account and do that securely is one of the other requirements. And then we talked about the enterprise grade SLA, trust, and custom pricing, right? So those things are also required in order to achieve the distribution for this business model. So one of the key takeaways I would say on this distribution model is there was the era of hosted SaaS, and the new era is deploying in customer VPCs. Because everybody is realizing that data is the king, and they want to protect that and ask the ISVs to bring their data or bring their agents to be able to deploy in their account. It brings data residency. It allows them to control the risks, and obviously it benefits you because you can also accelerate the procurement and finance side of it. Now, implementing that is a different question. Implementing BYOC is hard. There are a lot of challenges. And majority of them involves around how do you connect securely or privately from other accounts? How do you govern the access? How do you audit every action? But thankfully, AWS provides a lot of foundational services that you can put together in an effective way to build the secure solution. So if I have to bring the different requirements of the distribution that I've discussed along all the three models, here is what we need to implement. And ultimately, it comes down to that you will need a control plane to be able to implement or orchestrate your distribution. And when we talk about control plane, it involves tenant onboarding. It involves being able to deploy anywhere. It involves having a customer portal where customers can have the self-serve experience. It involves metering and billing and integrations with AWS marketplaces. It involves monitoring and providing SLAs. It involves observability and insights. So if things go wrong, that you have the support team who can provide the experience that your customers are looking for. It involves providing upgrades and patching timely for the CVE fixes or your software upgrades or infrastructure patches or new infrastructure upgrades or hardware that is being rolled out by AWS. It involves ensuring security and governance, right? All of those pieces have to be implemented in order to provide a true control plane that can deliver the distribution that your customers are looking for and achieve those above business models. Now, at OmniState, that's exactly the problem we solve. We help founders and ISVs to build your own private label control plane and deploy it in your own account. And the way it works is you can specify your product specification as a PRD. We generate that into the spec. You build your control plane. We deploy your control plane in your account. You test everything. You can optimize and you can scale. Let's do a live demo where Alok is going to talk about how to turn a VLLM project into a product.
All right. While it loads up, I'll just quickly give you a little bit of context around this, right? So as Kamal was talking about, there is basically open source, there's projects, and obviously there's code, but that all lives in your laptop or in your workstation, right? How do you actually get it in the hands of your customers? So that's basically what we were trying to go when we said you need to go from project to product, right? And so VLLM, for context for folks, is a very popular open source managed inference service. And think of all of the open source, open weight models, open source models. It needs an inference engine that effectively is what you can communicate with. So whether it's your IDE, whether it's Codex, any of these agents, they need some sort of an inferencing API. So that's what VLLM is all about. And so I wanted to take a quick example of how easy it is. Let's say you're a maintainer of VLLM and you want to monetize parts of it, or maybe even just not monetize, but just provide enterprise support. How do you actually get that in the hands of your customers and while checking all the boxes that Kamal was talking about, right? And so the way it starts, as Kamal mentioned, is very simple. You just have a specification, and we live in the age of declarative spec. Everything is, you just tell something to do something and it does it. And so that's primarily the mode of operation and interaction with us too. So you just give us a YAML that explicitly details from your product perspective, what do you actually have to put in place, right? So whether that's, what type of deployment, is it in your account, your customer's account? Is it multi-cloud, on-prem? There's a bunch of things that you describe in this specification. And you also then add in other controls, which is your observability story, your billing story, your could be integration story with respect to a bunch of other services, could be, as I said, maybe AWS services, right? So you declare all of this in this specification, and then you essentially ship that off to us using our CLI. So it's as simple as just say, for example, I'm going to take the example of this specification right here. So I have an account, AWS account, and I just want to deploy, or I want my customers to deploy all of their VLLM managed inferences in this service. And I'm using this account, which is owned by me. So all I have to do is just tell OmniState that just build a control plane around it or build a managed service around it. So it goes through a bunch of checkboxes to say, okay, this is how I'm going to templatize it. This is what effectively I need to put together to finalize your build. And then what comes out of it is what we call as a SaaS offer, but basically it's your customer portal, right? This is something that you can distribute to your customers for complete self-service of your service. So what that looks like is effectively private label, white labeled, dashboard. Now, this dashboard or this deployment portal is open source in the sense that you could take it, completely customize it, brand it, change the look and feel of it. And you want to simplify some of the options that you give to your customers. You can do any of that. But what you get out of the box is at least your customers, give your customers the ability to go and deploy this in their accounts, right? Or in your account. So the customer, as I said, so in this case, I already signed up as basically a VLLM customer. I've connected my AWS account, in fact, actually. And then I've deployed a couple of VLLM services right here. And so as Kamal mentioned, the key thing that folks are looking for is not an instruction sheet or a README on how to deploy VLLM. They just need an endpoint. And so that's what comes out of it at the end of the day. And so I also have an example right here of the same thing configured with OpenCode. So OpenCode is basically Codex, but open source, right? Or actually, Codex is open source too, but it's like Claude Code for open source. But the key thing is you just plug in that URL, right? Nothing else. And it's an OpenAI API compatible inference endpoint. That's what VLLM is great about, right? Great with, rather. And clearly, as you can see, there is literally, I asked OpenCode to go and do a bunch of things right now, actually. And it's literally working through and trying to create like a key value store, and it's basically coming up with something. And as one of the things that Daniel mentioned, this is the autonomous, the way these autonomous agents are today, they can actually take on much bigger projects themselves, and they can go off in a silo and build this on their own, right? So you want to, and so it's, as a provider, you want to give the customers the ability to try this very quickly, tear it down, do all of that without having to have them take on like, weeks long or day long efforts, right? And the second thing is, of course, you want to leverage infrastructure that AWS provides. Now, everyone cannot afford a GPU. Everyone cannot afford to buy, racks of data centers of GPUs. And so that's where AWS, obviously, with the whole primitive of cloud comes in. And so you want to leverage that and give customers just-in-time access, and you want some control plane, the whole, in terms of infrastructure management, to come in and take care of, billing and making sure that you're not leaving resources running around. So that's effectively what OmniStreet does. And so hopefully that gives you some idea of how easy it is to basically go from a spec to literally a managed service or an endpoint that basically your customers can try.
Thank you, Alok and Nikhil.